everyone, welcome to Deep Dives with Dogs. And today's topic is kind of we're going to talk about broadly espionage during the Second World War, but try to focus kind of on Operation Mincemeat, which happens April 28th. Oh, not April 28th, April 29th. My bad. April 29th, 1943. For those that are not aware what Operation Mincemeat is, Operation Mincemeat is a act of deception on the side of the Allies to convince the Germans and the Italians that the Allies are not planning on invading Sicily. Obviously, that was the plan. They were going to invade Sicily up and then through the rest of the boot of Italy. Um, However, they obviously wanted to deceive the enemy so that they didn't entrench as hard as they were. Um, this would happen through there was a body that would be washed up on the shores of Spain, and it would have a memo on it that basically says, "Hey, we're not gonna invade Sicily. We're gonna try something else." Blah 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 blah. You know, a little trick, a little deception. Um, Espionage obviously is used quite a bit during the Second World War. The Second World War is really not the birthplace of espionage. Espionage has always been used throughout human history through war. But this is really the birth of the more modern ways that we think of espionage. A lot of the big uh, espionage agencies that exist, the spy agencies, things like that, that exist in the world today, like the CIA, things like that, kind of get their start here. Um, and they really do have quite the bit of success during this war. The Allies really do deceive the Germans quite a bit, and the Axis in general. But to be fair, the Axis does as well. They have their own bits of espionage that do allow certain things to happen that maybe wouldn't have before. Um, but obviously, the Allies are just the ones that we remember the most because, well, to the victors go the spoils, you could say. Um, However, while Operation Mincemeat is definitely an important one, I almost wonder what is the more important of the espionages. Because another one that is obviously very well famous is the operation to convince the Germans that they would not invade in Normandy, but would rather invade at a different point, um, which is like the closest point between uh, England and the mainland. That was where they tried to convince them, and they even used people like Patton, who was considered pretty well renowned at this point, to confuse them. Also, this is a little bit of a punishment for Patton because of some actions that he did. Let's just say Patton isn't always necessarily the nicest to his troops. Let's go with that. Um, but Operation Mincemeat also has another interesting little tidbit that I personally think is really kind of cool. You know, it's one of those like, oh, how that works out. So the memo was written by a Navy commander. This Navy commander got this idea from a crime novel he had read. It's not that crazy to think, you know. It's something pretty simple, you know. People would be convinced of, hey, a body washed up. Look at that. It got a memo. Maybe a crash happened, something like that. Well, we're gonna take this and we're gonna use it as, haha, look at this. We got you. We've deceived you. But not necessarily the interesting part. The interesting part is not necessarily the what was written in the memo or how it was carried out, but who the author of that memo is. So that Navy commander is one Ian Fleming. If you don't know who Ian Fleming is the writer of James Bond. He's the creator of James Bond. So it's just kind of funny to think one of the great acts of espionage during the Second World War is written and carried out in some ways by the creator of one of the most famous spies in all of literature. Just an interesting little thing. James Bond himself is definitely an amalgamation of things from the Second World War. Um, one of the more famous things is Sir Christopher Lee. Obviously, he was a famous actor, but he was a spy as well during this war. Um, and Ian Fleming based James Bond partially on Sir Christopher Lee. Another little interesting tidbit for you. But personally, I thought that was really, really, really neat. Um, it really shows how connected the world is sometimes, where some of these people that did great things before will do great things again. Um, just interesting, to say the least. But Operation Mincemeat was a success. It really did convince the Axis that no, we're not invading Sicily, and then they did. They did invade Sicily, and it was a rousing success, you could say. Uh, Now the rest of Italy, it's going to be a little bit more of a grind. But hey, Sicily was quick. That's what matters. At least the launch point was quicker. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways I can improve these videos, leave a comment down below. I always read your comments. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.